The Candy Lady. Unraveling the terrifying Texas legend. Origins of the legend. The legend of the Candy Lady is believed to have originated in the early 1900s in a small rural town in Texas. The story centers around Clara Crane, a woman who endured unimaginable loss and grief, leading her down a dark and twisted path. According to the legend, Clara Crane was a loving wife until tragedy struck when her young daughter, Marcella, died in a horrific accident. Devastated by the loss, Clara's life spiraled out of control, eventually culminating in the murder of her husband, who she blamed for their daughter's death. The details of Clara's life before the tragedy are sketchy, but it's said that she was committed to a mental institution after her husband's murder. However, this is where the story takes a darker turn. Some versions of the tale suggest that Clara escaped from the asylum after only a few years. Others say she was released under mysterious circumstances, with the authorities losing track of her soon after. What is known, however, is that the legend of the Candy Lady began to take shape around this time, with whispers of a strange woman who lured children to their doom with promises of candy. The Candy Lady's reign of terror. The story goes that after her escape, Clara Crane, now known as the Candy Lady, began a reign of terror in the Texas countryside. Children in the area started to disappear without a trace, their last known whereabouts often linked to eerie tales of finding pieces of candy left on their windowsills. The candy, sweet and tantalizing, would appear night after night, luring the children closer to the edge of danger. It wasn't long before the disappearances became more frequent, and parents in the town grew increasingly alarmed. They would find notes written in a childish hand, stuffed inside the candy wrappers, notes that read, "Come play with me," or "I have more candy for you." These messages, along with the ever-growing number of missing children, led to widespread panic. As the number of disappearances climbed, rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed to have seen a ghostly figure lurking near the woods, her face hidden under a hood, her hands clutching a sack of candy. Others whispered of a shadowy presence watching from the darkness, her intentions far more sinister than they first appeared. The townspeople began to call her the Candy Lady, and a legend was born. Horrific discoveries. The climax of the Candy Lady's reign of terror is marked by a series of gruesome discoveries that further cemented her place in Texas folklore. As more children went missing, local authorities intensified their search, scouring the woods and abandoned buildings in the hopes of finding the lost boys and girls. It was during one such search that they made a horrifying discovery. A child's body, mutilated and left to rot, with candy stuffed into the eye sockets. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. Suddenly, the legend of the Candy Lady was no longer just a story to frighten children into obedience, it was a real and terrifying threat. The gruesome nature of the crime scene suggested that the killer had a deep, twisted hatred for children, one that manifested in the most horrific ways imaginable. The local sheriff, who had been skeptical of the legend, was found dead shortly after the discovery, his eyes gouged out and his pockets filled with candy. This chilling twist added a new layer of fear to the legend, convincing even the most hardened skeptics that the Candy Lady was more than just a story. The aftermath and legacy. As suddenly as the Candy Lady appeared, she vanished, leaving behind a trail of grief and unanswered questions. The disappearances stopped, and the town slowly returned to normal, but the scars left by the legend were deep. Families who had lost children never recovered from the trauma, and the town itself seemed to carry the weight of the Candy Lady's deeds for generations. Over time, the legend of the Candy Lady became a cautionary tale, a story told to children to keep them from wandering too far from home or accepting treats from strangers. But beneath the surface, the story served as a reminder of the dark history that lurked in the shadows of this Texas town. Some believed that the Candy Lady was still out there, waiting for the right moment to return and continue her twisted game. In the years that followed, the legend grew, taking on new forms and variations. Some versions of the story claim that the Candy Lady was a witch, using her sweets to cast spells on the children she captured. Others suggest that she was a demon, feeding on the fear and despair of her victims. But despite the different interpretations, one thing remained constant: the Candy Lady was a figure of pure, unadulterated evil, a monster born from grief and madness. Exploring the myth. Like many urban legends, the story of the Candy Lady has its skeptics. Some argue that the tale was likely a fabrication, a story concocted to explain the tragic disappearances of children in a time when communication and law enforcement were far less sophisticated. Others believe that the legend may have been inspired by real-life events, such as the actions of serial killers or child predators, with the details exaggerated over time to create the myth of the Candy Lady. Historians and folklorists have attempted to trace the origins of the story, but concrete evidence remains elusive. The lack of historical records or verified accounts of Clara Crane and her supposed crimes has led some to dismiss the story as nothing more than a ghostly tale, born from the fears and superstitions of a bygone era. However, for those who grew up hearing the legend, the story of the Candy Lady remains all too real. It's a tale that taps into deep-seated fears, the fear of losing a child, the fear of the unknown, and the fear of what lurks in the darkness. Whether or not the Candy Lady ever truly existed, her story continues to be told, a chilling reminder of the power of folklore to shape our perceptions of the world around us. The Candy Lady in popular culture. The legend of the Candy Lady has found its way into popular culture, inspiring books, movies, and even episodes of television shows. Her story has become a staple of horror fiction, with writers and filmmakers drawn to the eerie, southern Gothic atmosphere that surrounds her tale. The Candy Lady represents a uniquely American kind of horror, one that blends the supernatural with the psychological, creating a figure that is as much a product of the human mind as she is of the otherworldly. In recent years, the legend has experienced a resurgence, fueled by the internet and the growing popularity of urban legends and true crime stories. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and online forums have all contributed to keeping the story alive, with new generations discovering the chilling tale of the Candy Lady. Her story has become a part of the larger tapestry of American folklore, a symbol of the darkness that can exist even in the most seemingly innocent places. Conclusion: fact, fiction, or something in between. The tale of the Candy Lady is a potent mix of fact, fiction, and the unknown. It's a story that has transcended its origins to become a part of Texas' rich and haunting folklore. Whether she was a grieving mother turned vengeful spirit, a misunderstood figure, or a complete fabrication, the Candy Lady continues to captivate and terrify those who hear her story. The legend serves as a reminder of the power of storytelling and its ability to shape our fears and our understanding of the world. As long as there are dark woods to explore and tales to be told, the Candy Lady will remain a figure that haunts the imagination, a ghostly presence lingering on the edge of our collective consciousness. The tragic beginnings of Clara Crane. The origins of the Candy Lady legend are often traced back to a woman named Clara Crane, whose life was steeped in sorrow and loss. Born in the late 19th century, Clara lived in a small, close-knit town where she was known for her kindness and gentle demeanor. She married Leonard Crane, a farmer, and the two shared a modest but happy life, particularly after the birth of their daughter, Marcella. But the happiness was short-lived. When Marcella was just 5 years old, she died under mysterious circumstances, a tragedy that shattered Clara's world. The death of her beloved daughter drove Clara to the brink of insanity. Some say that Marcella's death was the result of an accident, while others believe it was due to negligence on the part of Leonard, who was rumored to have been drinking heavily at the time. The grief-stricken Clara became increasingly withdrawn, her once gentle nature twisted by bitterness and anger. She blamed Leonard for their daughter's death, and in a moment of madness, she poisoned him with candy laced with a lethal dose of arsenic. After Leonard's death, Clara was arrested and declared mentally unfit to stand trial. She was committed to the North Texas Lunatic Asylum, where she remained for several years. However, the story does not end there. According to the legend, Clara escaped from the asylum under mysterious circumstances, vanishing without a trace. It was after her disappearance that the eerie tale of the Candy Lady began to circulate, with many believing that Clara had transformed into the vengeful spirit known as the Candy Lady. The horrifying acts attributed to the Candy Lady. As the legend goes, following Clara's escape, children in the nearby towns began to disappear. It started innocently enough. Children would find candy on their windowsills in the morning, small, brightly colored sweets that seemed like a harmless treat. But soon, these treats were accompanied by handwritten notes, often scrawled in a childlike hand, urging the children to follow the trail of candy to the source. The messages were simple but chilling. "Come play with me," or "I have more candy for you." For a time, the children delighted in the mysterious treats, unaware of the danger lurking behind them. But as more children disappeared, the townspeople grew increasingly alarmed. The once innocent candy became a symbol of dread, and parents warned their children to stay away from the windows and to never, under any circumstances, take the candy. The notes grew more ominous, and rumors began to circulate that the candy lady was responsible for the disappearances. The few children who returned from their encounters with the candy lady were never the same. They spoke of a strange old woman with a wide, unsettling smile who offered them more sweets before leading them away to her home. These children described her house as a decrepit, rotting structure deep in the woods, filled with the smell of decay and the sight of other children's belongings. They claimed that the candy lady would sing lullabies to them, her voice soft and hypnotic, before she would suddenly turn violent, her demeanor shifting from sweet to malevolent in an instant. The disappearances continued for several years, with many of the missing children never being found. Those who were discovered were often mutilated, their bodies desecrated in grotesque ways, with candy stuffed into their mouths or placed in their empty eye sockets. The town was gripped by fear, and the legend of the candy lady grew, her name whispered in terror among children and adults alike. The investigation and the terrifying truth. As the number of disappearances mounted, local law enforcement agencies began to take the legend of the candy lady more seriously. The search for the missing children intensified, with entire communities banding together to scour the countryside. What they found only added to the horror of the tale. In a field near the edge of town, a farmer discovered a pile of rotting teeth wrapped in a piece of cloth, along with candy wrappers and scraps of paper bearing the same childlike handwriting that had been found in the earlier notes. Authorities followed this grisly trail to an abandoned farmhouse deep in the woods. Inside, they found evidence of unspeakable horrors, bloodstains, children's clothing, and the remains of what appeared to be makeshift cages. The most chilling discovery, however, was a collection of small candy wrappers and a diary that allegedly belonged to Clara Crane. The diary detailed her descent into madness, with entries describing how she lured children to her lair with promises of sweets, only to subject them to horrific torture before ending their lives. The investigation also led to the discovery of several unmarked graves on the property, each containing the remains of a child. The bodies were in various stages of decomposition, suggesting that the candy lady had been active for many years. Despite this evidence, Clara Crane was never found, and the case was eventually closed, with the authorities citing lack of conclusive proof. The disappearance of Clara Crane and the evidence found at the farmhouse only served to solidify the candy lady's place in Texas folklore. Even though the physical evidence pointed to a real person behind the legend, the townspeople couldn't shake the belief that there was something more supernatural at play. The story became a symbol of the community's darkest fears, an embodiment of the unknown terrors that lurked in the night. The psychological impact on the community. The legend of the candy lady left an indelible mark on the community, with its psychological impact lingering long after the events supposedly took place. For years, parents in the town would tell their children the story of the candy lady, using it as a cautionary tale to keep them from wandering too far from home or trusting strangers. The story served as a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the world and the consequences of naivety and misplaced trust. For the children who grew up hearing the legend, the candy lady became a symbol of fear, an ever-present threat that could strike at any moment. Even as adults, many of them carried the fear with them, passing the story down to their own children and perpetuating the cycle of terror. The legend took on a life of its own, evolving with each retelling and embedding itself deeper into the fabric of the community. Over time, the fear of the candy lady became intertwined with the broader anxieties and insecurities of the community. In a town where everyone knew each other, the idea that someone among them could be capable of such horrors was almost too much to bear. The legend provided a way to externalize those fears, turning them into something that could be contained and explained, even if only through the lens of folklore. Modern interpretations and the legacy of the candy lady. In the years since the legend of the candy lady first emerged, it has become a fixture in Texas folklore, with each new generation adding its own interpretations and embellishments to the story. The tale has inspired numerous works of fiction, from short stories and novels to films and television episodes. These modern retellings often explore the psychological horror of the story, delving into the themes of grief, madness, and the loss of innocence. Some versions of the legend have even crossed state lines, with variations of the Candy Lady story appearing in other parts of the United States. In these versions, the details may differ, the location, the names, the specific horrors, but the core of the story remains the same: a woman, driven to madness by loss, preying on the most vulnerable members of society in the most horrific way imaginable. In popular culture, the Candy Lady has become something of a boogeyman, a figure used to evoke fear and suspense. Her story has been featured in podcasts, true crime documentaries, and urban legend compilations, often presented as one of the most terrifying tales in American folklore. Despite the lack of concrete evidence to support the existence of the Candy Lady, her story continues to resonate, a testament to the power of folklore to capture the darkest aspects of the human experience. The unresolved mysteries. Despite the passage of time and the countless retellings of the legend, many questions about the Candy Lady remain unanswered. Was Clara Crane a real person, or was she a fictional character created to explain a series of tragic events? If she was real, did she truly commit the horrific acts attributed to her, or was she the victim of a town's collective hysteria? And perhaps most chillingly, if the Candy Lady was responsible for the disappearances, where did she go after her supposed escape from the asylum? These unresolved mysteries have only added to the allure of the legend, inviting speculation and debate among those who hear it. Some believe that the Candy Lady was a real person whose story was exaggerated over time, while others argue that she was entirely fictional, a manifestation of the fears and anxieties of the community. Still, others suggest that there may be some truth to the supernatural elements of the story, pointing to the eerie coincidences and unexplained events that have occurred in the area over the years. Whatever the truth may be, the legend of the Candy Lady remains one of the most haunting tales in Texas folklore. It is a story that continues to captivate and terrify, a reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural and the enduring power of fear. Conclusion. The Candy Lady's place in folklore. The story of the Candy Lady is more than just a ghost story. It is a reflection of the fears and uncertainties that have plagued communities for generations. It is a tale that speaks to the universal fear of the unknown, the horror of losing a child, and the terror of being unable to protect those we love. The legend of the Candy Lady has endured for over a century, not because of its historical accuracy, but because of its ability to tap into these deep-seated fears. As long as there are dark nights and quiet woods, the story of the Candy Lady will continue to be told, a chilling reminder of the horrors that can exist just beyond the edge of our understanding. Whether she was a real person or a figment of collective imagination, the Candy Lady has become an enduring symbol of fear, a ghostly figure who haunts the nightmares of those who dare to believe in her. And so the legend lives on, whispered among children, recounted by storytellers, and immortalized in the annals of Texas folklore. The Candy Lady remains a terrifying figure, a shadowy presence that lingers in the minds of those who hear her story, a reminder that sometimes the most frightening monsters are the ones that come from within. The cultural and historical context of the Candy Lady legend. To fully understand the legend of the Candy Lady, it's essential to place it within the broader cultural and historical context of early 20th century Texas. The state, with its vast landscapes and relatively isolated communities, was fertile ground for folklore. In the early 1900s, rural Texas towns were often tight-knit, with everyone knowing each other's business. News traveled slowly, and in the absence of modern communication, rumors and stories could take on a life of their own. This environment, coupled with the hardships of life at the time, poverty, disease, and loss, created a perfect storm for the birth of legends. The story of Clara Crane, who is said to have become the Candy Lady, emerges from this backdrop. Her tale is one of extreme loss and mental unraveling, themes that would have resonated deeply with people living in an era where death, particularly the death of children, was a common and devastating occurrence. The psychological toll of such loss is reflected in the legend, where grief morphs into madness and a mother's love becomes something twisted and deadly. The Candy Lady, therefore, can be seen as a manifestation of the community's fears and anxieties, a representation of what can happen when grief and guilt consume a person. Unraveling the mystery of Clara Crane. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Candy Lady legend is the enigmatic figure of Clara Crane herself. According to the tale, Clara was a mother driven mad by the death of her daughter, but who was she really? Historical records from the time are sparse, but some local historians have attempted to piece together a more detailed picture of her life. Clara is believed to have been born in the late 1800s, a time when Texas was transitioning from the wild frontier to a more settled state. Her marriage to Leonard Crane was likely a typical union of the time, one built on survival and the harsh realities of rural life rather than romance. The tragedy that struck Clara's life, the death of her daughter Marcella, is a key turning point in the legend. Some versions of the story suggest that Marcella's death was a result of negligence, perhaps an accident that could have been prevented. Others hint at something more sinister, a deliberate act that was covered up. This ambiguity adds to the horror of the tale, as it leaves open the possibility that Clara's madness was fueled by a deeper, more disturbing truth. After Marcella's death, Clara's life reportedly spiraled out of control. Her descent into madness is marked by increasingly erratic behavior, culminating in the poisoning of her husband. The use of candy as the murder weapon is particularly symbolic, representing the perversion of something sweet and innocent into something deadly. This act sets the stage for Clara's transformation into the Candy Lady, a figure who uses the same method to lure and kill children. The connection between her personal tragedy and the subsequent horrors she inflicts on others is a chilling reminder of how grief can distort and destroy. The evolution of the legend over time. As with all folklore, the story of the Candy Lady has evolved over time, taking on new dimensions and meanings as it has been passed down through generations. In the early years, the legend was likely a local story, shared among the residents of the small Texas towns where the disappearances occurred. However, as the years went by, the tale spread beyond its original boundaries, becoming a part of the larger tapestry of American urban legends. One of the most fascinating aspects of this evolution is how the Candy Lady has been reinterpreted in different contexts. In some versions of the story, she is portrayed as a purely supernatural entity, a ghost or demon who preys on children. In others, she is depicted as a more human figure, a deranged woman who, driven by grief, becomes a child murderer. These differing interpretations reflect the changing cultural landscape of America, where the line between the real and the supernatural often blurs in the stories we tell. In recent decades, the legend of the Candy Lady has been revitalized by the internet, where urban legends and true crime stories have found new audiences. Online communities dedicated to horror and folklore have embraced the story, retelling it in blogs, podcasts, and videos. This digital renaissance has not only kept the legend alive, but has also introduced it to a global audience, ensuring that the Candy Lady remains a part of the horror genre for years to come. The psychological impact and symbolism. The enduring power of the Candy Lady legend lies in its psychological impact and rich symbolism. At its core, the story is about the corruption of innocence, the transformation of a mother's love into something monstrous. The candy that Clara uses to lure her victims is a symbol of this perversion. Candy, typically associated with childhood joy and innocence, becomes a tool of death and destruction in the hands of the Candy Lady. This inversion of a symbol of sweetness into one of horror speaks to the deep anxieties that underlie the legend. The Candy Lady can also be seen as a representation of the fear of the unknown, particularly the unknown dangers that can lurk within one's own community. In the early 20th century, when communication and transportation were limited, communities were often isolated, and the idea that a killer could be living among them was a source of profound fear. The legend taps into this fear, suggesting that even in the most familiar places, danger can be lurking just out of sight. Additionally, the story of the Candy Lady resonates with the universal fear of losing a child. The disappearances of the children in the legend represent every parent's worst nightmare, and the horrifying fates that befall them underscore the helplessness that comes with such loss. The legend plays on these fears, turning them into a cautionary tale that has been used to warn children and adults alike about the dangers of trusting strangers. The Candy Lady in modern popular culture. In modern popular culture, the Candy Lady has taken on a life of her own, becoming a figure of fascination for horror enthusiasts and storytellers. Her story has inspired a variety of creative works, from short stories and novels to films and television shows. In these retellings, the Candy Lady is often portrayed as a complex villain, one whose actions are driven by a tragic past. This portrayal adds depth to the character, making her more than just a one-dimensional monster. One of the most significant modern adaptations of the Candy Lady legend is its inclusion in true crime and paranormal documentaries, where it is often featured as one of America's most chilling urban legends. These documentaries explore the history of the legend, examining the possible real-life events that could have inspired it, as well as the psychological and cultural factors that have kept it alive. The inclusion of the Candy Lady in these documentaries has helped to cement her place in the pantheon of American horror figures. The legend has also made its way into the world of video games and graphic novels, where the Candy Lady is often reimagined as a supernatural entity with otherworldly powers. These adaptations take creative liberties with the story, incorporating elements of fantasy and horror to create a character that is both terrifying and captivating. In these modern retellings, the Candy Lady is often depicted as a ghostly figure who haunts the woods, luring children to their doom with her deadly sweets. The ongoing fascination with the Candy Lady is a testament to the power of folklore and the human need to understand and confront our fears through storytelling. The legend has persisted for over a century, not just because it is a compelling story, but because it speaks to deep-seated fears and anxieties that are universal. The Candy Lady represents the dark side of human nature, the capacity for grief to turn into madness, for love to become something twisted and deadly. For many, the legend of the Candy Lady is more than just a story. It is a reflection of the darker aspects of society, a reminder of the potential for evil that exists within us all. The tale serves as a cautionary reminder of the dangers that can arise when we allow our fears and emotions to consume us. It also highlights the importance of community and vigilance, as the legend warns of the horrors that can occur when we fail to protect those who are most vulnerable. The Candy Lady continues to captivate the imaginations of those who hear her story, her legend enduring as a chilling reminder of the power of fear and the unknown. Whether she was a real person or a fictional creation, the Candy Lady has left an indelible mark on Texas folklore and American horror. Her story is one that will continue to be told for generations to come, a haunting tale of loss, madness, and the terrifying consequences of unchecked grief. Conclusion: the Candy Lady's enduring legacy. The legend of the Candy Lady is more than just a ghost story. It is a reflection of the fears, anxieties, and cultural dynamics of the time in which it was born. It is a tale that has evolved over the years, taking on new meanings and interpretations as it has been passed down through generations. Today, the Candy Lady remains a potent symbol of horror, a figure who represents the darkest aspects of human nature and the dangers that can arise when we allow our fears to take control. As we look back on the story of the Candy Lady, we see a legend that is as complex and multifaceted as the human experience itself. It is a story that speaks to our deepest fears, our greatest losses, and our ongoing struggle to make sense of the world around us. Whether real or imagined, the Candy Lady has become a part of the cultural fabric of Texas and beyond, a figure who will continue to haunt our nightmares and captivate our imaginations for years to come. In the end, the legend of the Candy Lady is a reminder of the enduring power of folklore, the ability of stories to capture our deepest fears, and to give voice to the unspeakable horrors that lurk in the shadows. It is a tale that will continue to be told, whispered in the dark and shared around campfires, a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that we create ourselves. The rise of the legend, how the Candy Lady became a household name. In the early 20th century, Texas was a land of vast, uncharted territories and close-knit rural communities. Life in these towns was often hard, marked by poverty, isolation, and a constant struggle against the elements. It was in this environment that the legend of the Candy Lady took root, growing from whispers and rumors into a story that would haunt the state for decades to come. The legend first gained notoriety when children in rural Texas towns began to vanish under mysterious circumstances. At the time, these disappearances were attributed to natural causes, perhaps a wild animal attack or a tragic accident, but as more children went missing, a pattern began to emerge. Parents started to notice small pieces of candy left on their children's windowsills, along with notes written in an eerie, childlike scrawl. The candy, once a symbol of sweetness and joy, now carried a sinister connotation, a lure meant to draw the children into something far more dangerous. As the disappearances continued, the story of the candy lady began to spread. It wasn't long before every parent in the area had heard the tale of the mysterious woman who lured children away with candy, only to spirit them off to a fate unknown. The legend grew with each retelling, gaining new details and embellishments until it became an integral part of the region's folklore. The Candy Lady was no longer just a story, she was a very real threat, a figure who haunted the dreams of children and adults alike. The mysterious disappearances and the town's descent into panic. The Candy Lady's reign of terror reached its peak when entire families began to report their children missing. The small, rural towns of Texas were ill-equipped to deal with such a crisis, and the fear that gripped these communities was palpable. With no clues to follow and no suspects to apprehend, the local authorities were at a loss, and the townspeople were left to fend for themselves against an unseen enemy. The towns were plunged into a state of panic, with parents refusing to let their children out of their sight. Windows were nailed shut, and doors were locked tight at night. The once thriving community events where children played freely were abandoned, and a sense of dread hung over the town like a dark cloud. The Candy Lady had not only taken the children, she had taken the town's sense of safety and security. As the weeks turned into months, the legend of the Candy Lady grew darker. Stories circulated of children who had been found wandering the woods, their minds broken by the horrors they had witnessed. These children spoke of a woman with a voice as sweet as honey who promised them candy if they would only follow her. They described a decrepit house hidden deep in the forest where the smell of rot and decay hung in the air and where other children's voices echoed from the shadows. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of these tales was the Candy Lady herself. She was often described as an old woman with hollow eyes and a smile that never reached her lips. Her clothes were tattered, and she moved with an unnatural grace, as if she were a puppet being controlled by invisible strings. The children who escaped her clutches were never the same, their innocence shattered by the horrors they had endured. The hunt for the Candy Lady, a community in crisis. As the disappearances continued and the fear in the community reached a fever pitch, a group of local men decided to take matters into their own hands. They formed a vigilant group, determined to track down the Candy Lady and put an end to her reign of terror. Armed with shotguns and torches, they scoured the woods and fields, searching for any sign of the mysterious woman who had been preying on their children. The search lasted for weeks, with the men covering every inch of the surrounding countryside. They found nothing but empty fields and silent woods, no trace of the Candy Lady, no evidence of where she might be hiding. Some of the men began to wonder if she was even real, or if she was just a figment of the townspeople's collective imagination. But others were convinced that she was out there, watching them from the shadows, waiting for her next victim. The search finally came to an end when the men stumbled upon an abandoned farmhouse deep in the woods. The house was in a state of disrepair, with broken windows and a sagging roof, but there was something about it that sent a chill down their spines. As they approached the house, they noticed a faint smell of something sweet and rotten, a smell that reminded them of the candy their children had found on their windowsills. Inside the house, the men found a scene straight out of a nightmare. The walls were covered in scratch marks, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. The floors were littered with candy wrappers and scraps of paper, and in the corner of the room, they found a pile of children's clothes, neatly folded and stacked. But the most horrifying discovery was a small, blood-stained doll lying on the floor, its glass eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Despite their best efforts, the men never found the Candy Lady. The house was searched from top to bottom, but there was no sign of her, no clue as to where she had gone. The only thing they found was a single note, written in the same childlike scrawl that had been found on the candy wrappers. It read, "She's watching you." The aftermath, how the Candy Lady became a symbol of fear. The discovery of the abandoned farmhouse marked the end of the Candy Lady's reign of terror, but the legend lived on. The townspeople never forgot the fear and dread that had gripped their community, and the story of the Candy Lady was passed down from generation to generation as a cautionary tale. Parents would tell their children the story to keep them from wandering too far from home, and the Candy Lady became a symbol of the dangers that lurked in the world outside their small rural town. But the legend of the Candy Lady was not just a story to scare children, it was also a reflection of the fears and anxieties of the community. In a time when life was hard and the world was full of unknown dangers, the Candy Lady represented the ultimate threat: the loss of a child, the breakdown of safety and security, and the fear of the unknown. The story was a way for the townspeople to make sense of their fears, to give a name and a face to the things that terrified them most. As the years went by, the legend of the Candy Lady evolved, taking on new forms and meanings. Some versions of the story suggested that the Candy Lady was not just a vengeful spirit, but a witch or demon who used her powers to lure children to their doom. Others claimed that she was still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The details of the story may have changed, but the core of the legend remained the same: a tale of fear, loss, and the dangers that lurk in the shadows. The Candy Lady's legacy. A legend that endures. Today, the legend of the Candy Lady is more than just a story. It is a part of Texas cultural heritage, a symbol of the state's rich and often dark history. The tale has inspired countless works of fiction, from horror novels to films, and it continues to be a popular topic of discussion in online forums and podcasts dedicated to urban legends and folklore. The enduring appeal of the Candy Lady lies in her ability to tap into some of our deepest fears: the fear of losing a loved one, the fear of the unknown, and the fear of what lies beyond the edges of our understanding. She is a figure who represents the darker aspects of human nature, a reminder that even in the most idyllic of settings, danger can be lurking just out of sight. In a way, the Candy Lady has become a modern-day boogeyman, a figure who embodies the anxieties and fears of a new generation. Her story is one that continues to resonate with people, not just because it is terrifying, but because it speaks to something universal: the fear of what we cannot see, and the terror of what might be waiting for us in the darkness. The psychological and cultural impact of the Candy Lady legend. The Candy Lady legend is more than just a tale of horror. It is a window into the psyche of the community that gave birth to it. The story reflects the fears and anxieties of a time when life was uncertain and danger was ever present. In the early 20th century, rural Texas was a place where death and loss were common, and the fear of losing a child was a constant undercurrent in the lives of parents. The Candy Lady legend can be seen as a way for the community to process these fears, to give form to the intangible anxieties that haunted them. The psychological impact of the Candy Lady legend is profound. For those who grew up hearing the story, the Candy Lady became a symbol of the ultimate fear, the fear of the unknown. She was a reminder that danger could strike at any moment, and that even the most innocent-seeming things, like a piece of candy, could be a trap. The legend served as a cautionary tale, a way for parents to protect their children by instilling in them a healthy fear of the unknown. Culturally, the Candy Lady legend is a reflection of the time and place in which it was born. In a world where communication was limited and news traveled slowly, stories like the Candy Lady filled the gaps, providing explanations for the unexplained and a sense of control in a chaotic world. The legend also speaks to the power of storytelling and how stories can shape our perceptions of the world around us. The Candy Lady in the modern era. From folklore to pop culture icon. In the modern era, the Candy Lady has transcended her origins as a local legend and has become a pop culture icon. Her story has been featured in books, movies, and television shows, and she has become a popular subject for horror enthusiasts and true crime aficionados. The legend has even inspired urban exploration, with people venturing into the Texas countryside in search of the abandoned farmhouse where the Candy Lady is said to have lived. The internet has played a significant role in the resurgence of the Candy Lady legend. Online forums, podcasts, and YouTube channels dedicated to urban legends have introduced the story to a new generation of listeners, many of whom are captivated by the tale's blend of horror and mystery. The digital age has allowed the legend to spread far beyond its Texas origins, making the Candy Lady a figure of national and even international interest. The Candy Lady's transition from folklore to pop culture icon is a testament to the enduring power of the story. It is a tale that continues to resonate with people, not just because it is frightening, but because it speaks to universal fears and anxieties. The legend has proven to be adaptable, evolving with the times while maintaining its core elements of horror and mystery. Conclusion: The Candy Lady's place in Texas folklore. The legend of the Candy Lady is a story that has withstood the test of time, evolving from a local tale of terror into a widely recognized piece of Texas folklore. It is a story that speaks to the darkest corners of the human psyche, exploring themes of grief, madness, and the corruption of innocence. The Candy Lady is more than just a ghost story. She is a symbol of the fears that haunt us all, a reminder that even the most seemingly innocent things can hide a sinister reality. As we reflect on the Candy Lady legend, we see a story that is as complex as it is terrifying. It is a tale that has grown and changed over the years, taking on new meanings and interpretations as it has been passed down through generations. Yet, at its core, it remains a story about fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of loss, and the fear of what lies just beyond the edges of our understanding. The Candy Lady will continue to be a part of Texas folklore, her story told and retold by those who seek to understand the darker aspects of human nature. Whether she was a real person or a figment of collective imagination, the Candy Lady has left an indelible mark on the cultural landscape, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create ourselves. Clara Crane, the woman behind the legend. The story of the Candy Lady begins with Clara Crane, a woman whose life was marked by an unimaginable tragedy that would lead her down a path of madness. Born in the late 19th century, Clara was an ordinary woman living in rural Texas. She married Leonard Crane, and together they had a daughter, Marcella. Their life was simple, yet happy, until a tragic accident claimed the life of their beloved daughter. Marcella's death shattered Clara's world. She fell into a deep depression, consumed by grief and guilt. The once loving mother became withdrawn and cold, her mental state deteriorating with each passing day. The townspeople began to notice strange behavior from Clara, who would spend hours at her daughter's grave, talking to her as if she was still alive. The community's concern grew when Clara was rumored to have started giving candy to local children, saying it was from Marcella. As the years went by, Clara's grief turned to rage, particularly towards her husband Leonard, whom she blamed for Marcella's death. In a fit of madness, she poisoned Leonard, using candy laced with arsenic. This act of murder marked the beginning of Clara's transformation from a grieving mother to the notorious Candy Lady. After Leonard's death, Clara was arrested and declared mentally unfit to stand trial. She was committed to the North Texas Lunatic Asylum, where she was supposed to spend the rest of her life. But Clara's story didn't end there. According to legend, she managed to escape the asylum under mysterious circumstances, disappearing into the night. Her escape marked the birth of the Candy Lady, as the legend would have it, a vengeful spirit, or perhaps a deranged woman, who preyed on the children of rural Texas, luring them with sweets only to lead them to their doom. The legend grows. The disappearances begin. Following Clara's escape, strange occurrences began to plague the small towns of Texas. It started with candy left on the windowsills of children's bedrooms, brightly colored sweets that appeared overnight, seemingly out of nowhere. The children, naturally drawn to the candy, would eagerly take it, often finding themselves visited by the mysterious figure who left it there. At first, the candy seemed like a harmless treat, but soon, parents began to notice their children whispering about a kind woman who offered them more sweets and invitations to come out and play. As the candy deliveries continued, the townspeople grew uneasy. The children began to speak of a woman with a sweet, soothing voice who promised them more candy if they followed her. Some children returned from their encounters with the Candy Lady, but others did not. Those who returned were often too traumatized to speak of what they had seen, their eyes wide with terror, their words incoherent. The disappearances escalated, and the community's fear turned into hysteria. Parents kept their children indoors, and the once friendly towns turned into places of suspicion and dread. The legend of the Candy Lady became more than just a story. It was a palpable fear that gripped the hearts of everyone in the area. The candy, once a symbol of innocence and joy, had become a harbinger of death, a lure that led children to a fate worse than anything their parents could imagine. The horrific discoveries, when the legend became reality. The legend of the Candy Lady took on a horrifying reality when the bodies of several missing children were found. These discoveries were the stuff of nightmares, gruesome scenes that shocked even the most hardened members of the community. The bodies were often found in remote areas, their eyes gouged out and replaced with candy. Some were found with notes stuffed in their mouths, bearing the same childlike handwriting that had been found on the candy wrappers. These discoveries solidified the Candy Lady's place in Texas folklore as a figure of pure evil. The gruesome nature of the crime suggested that the perpetrator harbored a deep and twisted hatred for children. The notes left with the bodies were particularly chilling, often containing messages like, "No more candy for you," or "You should have been good." These messages, combined with the mutilation of the bodies, painted a picture of a killer who derived pleasure from the suffering of her victims. The local authorities, initially skeptical of the supernatural elements of the story, could no longer deny that something horrific was happening. The sheriff, who had dismissed the legend as mere superstition, became a believer when he himself was found dead under mysterious circumstances. His body was discovered in his office, his eyes gouged out and his pockets filled with candy, a grim reminder that the Candy Lady could strike anyone, anywhere. The Candy Lady's legacy, a tale that refuses to die. As suddenly as the disappearances began, they stopped. The Candy Lady seemed to vanish without a trace, leaving behind only the terror and the grief she had inflicted on the community. But while the physical threat may have disappeared, the legend lived on. The townspeople never forgot the horror that had visited them, and the story of the Candy Lady was passed down through generations, each retelling adding new layers of fear and mystery. Over time, the Candy Lady became a fixture of local folklore, a story that parents told their children to keep them from wandering too far from home. The legend also served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting strangers, a lesson that was deeply ingrained in the community's collective consciousness. The Candy Lady became more than just a ghost story. She became a symbol of the dark side of human nature, a reminder that even the most innocent-seeming things can hide a sinister reality. In the years since the legend first emerged, it has taken on a life of its own. The story of the Candy Lady has been retold in countless books, movies, and television shows, each version adding new twists and turns to the tale. The character of the Candy Lady has become a pop culture icon, a figure who embodies the fears and anxieties of the modern world. Psychological and symbolic interpretations of the Candy Lady. The Candy Lady legend resonates on a deep psychological level, tapping into some of our most primal fears. At its core, the story is about the corruption of innocence, the transformation of something sweet and harmless into something deadly. The candy that Clara uses to lure her victims is a symbol of this perversion, representing the way in which the things we trust can become instruments of our destruction. The Candy Lady herself can be seen as a representation of the dangers that lurk within the human psyche. Her transformation from a grieving mother into a child killer reflects the ways in which grief and guilt can twist a person's mind, turning love into hate and nurturing into destruction. The legend suggests that the true horror lies not in the supernatural elements of the story, but in the very real possibility that anyone, under the right circumstances, can become a monster. The story also speaks to the fear of the unknown, particularly the unknown dangers that can lurk within one's own community. In a world where communication was limited and life was uncertain, the idea that a killer could be living among them was a source of profound fear. The Candy Lady legend provided a way for the community to externalize these fears, turning them into something tangible that could be confronted and, ultimately, defeated. The Candy Lady in popular culture, a modern-day boogeyman. In the modern era, the Candy Lady has become a symbol of horror and fear, a figure who has transcended her origins to become a pop culture icon. Her story has been featured in a wide range of media, from horror novels and short stories to films and television shows. Each adaptation brings a new perspective to the legend, exploring different aspects of the Candy Lady's character and the psychological horror that she represents. One of the most significant ways in which the Candy Lady has entered modern popular culture is through the internet. The rise of online forums, podcasts, and YouTube channels dedicated to urban legends and true crime stories has introduced the Candy Lady to a new generation of horror enthusiasts. These digital platforms have allowed the legend to spread far beyond its Texas origins, making the Candy Lady a figure of national and even international interest. The Candy Lady's popularity in popular culture is a testament to the enduring power of the legend. Her story continues to resonate with people, not just because it is frightening, but because it speaks to universal fears and anxieties. The Candy Lady has become a modern-day boogeyman, a figure who embodies the darkest aspects of human nature and the dangers that can arise when we allow our fears to take control. Conclusion: the Candy Lady's enduring influence. The legend of the Candy Lady is a story that has endured for over a century, evolving from a local tale of terror into a widely recognized piece of American folklore. It is a story that explores the darker corners of the human psyche, delving into themes of grief, madness, and the loss of innocence. The Candy Lady is more than just a ghost story. She is a symbol of the fears and anxieties that have haunted communities for generations. As we reflect on the Candy Lady legend, we see a story that has grown and changed over the years, taking on new meanings and interpretations with each retelling. Yet, at its core, it remains a story about fear. The fear of the unknown, the fear of loss, and the fear of what lies just beyond the edges of our understanding. The Candy Lady will continue to be a part of Texas folklore, a story told and retold by those who seek to understand the darker aspects of human nature. Whether she was a real person or a figment of collective imagination, the Candy Lady has left an indelible mark on the cultural landscape, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create ourselves. The Candy Lady's first victims, the disappearance of innocence. The story of the Candy Lady is most terrifying because it targets the most vulnerable members of society, children. As the legend goes, after Clara Crane's escape from the asylum, she retreated to the rural areas of Texas, where she began a campaign of terror that would forever etch her name into local legend. Her method was simple yet horrifyingly effective. She would leave candy on the windowsills of children's bedrooms, drawing them out of the safety of their homes and into her clutches. The first reported disappearance attributed to the Candy Lady involved a young boy named Johnny, who was last seen playing in his yard. His parents found a trail of candy leading away from the house, and by the time they realized something was wrong, it was too late. Johnny had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a small pile of candy wrappers and a note that simply read, "Going to play, be back soon." As the disappearances continued, the once peaceful town was gripped by fear. Parents became increasingly paranoid, and the sight of candy, once a symbol of childhood innocence and joy, became a source of terror. The children who returned from encounters with the Candy Lady were forever changed, their innocence stripped away by the horrors they had witnessed. They spoke in whispers of a woman with a kind voice who promised them candy and games, only to reveal her true nature when it was too late to escape. The loss of these children marked the beginning of a dark chapter in the town's history, one that would be remembered for generations to come. The Candy Lady's victims were not just the children she lured away, but the entire community, which was forever scared by the fear and uncertainty that her actions brought. The search for answers: was the Candy Lady real? One of the most enduring aspects of the Candy Lady legend is the question of whether she was a real person or simply a figment of the community's collective imagination. Over the years, historians and folklorists have attempted to trace the origins of the story, sifting through historical records and eyewitness accounts in search of the truth. What they have found is a mix of fact and fiction, a tapestry of stories that together form the legend we know today. The real-life inspiration for the Candy Lady is often linked to the mysterious case of Clara Crane, a woman who was indeed committed to a mental institution after poisoning her husband. However, the details of her life after her escape are shrouded in mystery. There are no official records that confirm Clara's whereabouts after she fled the asylum, leading some to speculate that she may have died in obscurity, while others believe she continued her reign of terror under a different name. Adding to the mystery are the reports of missing children in the area during the time Clara was supposedly active. While some historians have found evidence of unexplained disappearances, there is no concrete proof linking them to a single perpetrator. This lack of evidence has led to various interpretations of the legend, with some viewing it as a cautionary tale born out of the community's fears, while others believe there is a kernel of truth at its core. The ambiguity surrounding the Candy Lady's existence only serves to enhance the legend's mystique. Whether she was a real person or not, the impact of the story on the community was undeniable. The fear she instilled in the townspeople was real, as were the changes in behavior that followed her supposed reign of terror. In this way, the legend of the Candy Lady blurs the line between myth and reality, leaving us to wonder how much of the story is true and how much is a product of our darkest fears. The Candy Lady's transformation into a supernatural entity. As the story of the Candy Lady spread, it began to take on a more supernatural tone. What started as a tale of a madwoman preying on children gradually evolved into a story of a vengeful spirit, a ghostly figure who could not be killed or captured. This transformation from human to supernatural entity is a common theme in folklore, where the boundaries between life and death, reality, and the paranormal are often fluid. In the supernatural version of the Candy Lady legend, Clara Crane did not merely escape from the asylum, she died there, and her spirit returned to exact revenge on the community that had wronged her. In this telling, the Candy Lady is no longer a flesh and blood woman, but a ghostly presence who haunts the woods and fields, waiting to lure children to their doom. The idea of the Candy Lady as a supernatural being adds a new layer of horror to the story. As a ghost, she cannot be stopped by conventional means. She can appear and disappear at will, and she is driven not by human motives, but by a relentless desire for vengeance. This version of the story plays on the fear of the unknown, the idea that there are forces beyond our control that can strike without warning. The supernatural elements of the Candy Lady legend also tap into deeper cultural fears about death and the afterlife. In many cultures, ghosts are seen as restless spirits, souls who have unfinished business or who were wronged in life. The Candy Lady, in this interpretation, becomes a symbol of unresolved grief and anger, a manifestation of the town's collective guilt for failing to protect the children who fell victim to her. The influence of the Candy Lady on local culture. The legend of the Candy Lady has had a profound impact on the culture of the communities where the story is told. Over the years, the tale has become more than just a ghost story. It has become a part of the local identity, a shared narrative that unites people through a common fear. This cultural significance is reflected in the way the story is passed down from generation to generation, each retelling adding new details and interpretations. In some towns, the Candy Lady is still used as a cautionary figure, a way to teach children about the dangers of trusting strangers or wandering too far from home. The story is often told around campfires or during Halloween, when the line between the living and the dead is believed to be at its thinnest. The Candy Lady has become a modern-day boogeyman, a figure who embodies the fears and anxieties of both children and adults. The legend has also influenced local traditions and customs. In some areas, parents continue to warn their children about the dangers of taking candy from strangers, using the story of the Candy Lady as a way to instill caution. The tale has even inspired local festivals and events, where people gather to celebrate their shared folklore and keep the story alive. In this way, the Candy Lady has become more than just a character in a story. She has become a symbol of the community's collective fears and values. The legend serves as a reminder of the importance of protecting the vulnerable, of staying vigilant in the face of danger, and of the ways in which our fears can shape our behavior and beliefs. The Candy Lady in the modern age, from folklore to fiction. In the modern age, the legend of the Candy Lady has found new life in the world of fiction and entertainment. The story has been adapted into numerous books, movies, and television shows, each version offering a unique take on the legend. These adaptations often explore the psychological and supernatural elements of the story, delving into the Candy Lady's motivations and the impact of her actions on the community. One of the most popular genres for Candy Lady adaptations is horror, where the story's blend of real-world terror and supernatural horror makes it a perfect fit. In these adaptations, the Candy Lady is often portrayed as a malevolent spirit, a figure who embodies the darkest aspects of human nature. Her character is frequently used to explore themes of grief, madness, and the consequences of unresolved trauma. The Candy Lady has also become a popular subject in the world of true crime, where her story is often featured in podcasts, documentaries, and online forums dedicated to urban legends. These platforms have introduced the legend to a global audience, ensuring that the story continues to be told and retold in new and interesting ways. In the digital age, the Candy Lady has become a symbol of the power of storytelling. Her story is a reminder that legends are not static, they evolve and change over time, reflecting the fears and concerns of the people who tell them. The Candy Lady is a testament to the enduring power of folklore, a story that continues to captivate and terrify audiences, even in a world where the line between myth and reality increasingly blurred. Conclusion: the eternal horror of the Candy Lady. The legend of the Candy Lady is a story that has stood the test of time, evolving from a local tale of terror into a widely recognized piece of American folklore. It is a story that explores the darkest corners of the human psyche, delving into themes of grief, madness, and the loss of innocence. The Candy Lady is more than just a ghost story. She is a symbol of the fears and anxieties that have haunted communities for generations. As we reflect on the Candy Lady legend, we see a story that has grown and changed over the years, taking on new meanings and interpretations with each retelling. Yet, at its core, it remains a story about fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of loss, and the fear of what lies just beyond the edges of our understanding. The Candy Lady will continue to be a part of Texas folklore, her story told and retold by those who seek to understand the darker aspects of human nature. Whether she was a real person or a figment of collective imagination, the Candy Lady has left an indelible mark on the cultural landscape, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create ourselves. The legend of the Candy Lady reminds us that stories have the power to shape our reality, to influence our beliefs and behaviors, and to connect us to our past. It is a story that will continue to be told as long as there are those who are willing to listen, a tale that will haunt the imaginations of generations to come. The cultural resonance of the Candy Lady. The enduring appeal of the Candy Lady legend lies not just in its horror, but in its deep cultural resonance. At its heart, the story is a reflection of societal fears, of losing our children, of the unknown dangers lurking just beyond the familiar, and of the ways in which grief and madness can transform even the most ordinary person into something monstrous. The Candy Lady taps into these primal fears, making her a figure of both terror and fascination. In the early 20th century, the communities where the Candy Lady legend took root were small, tight-knit, and often isolated. These were places where everyone knew everyone else, where the loss of a child was a tragedy that affected the entire town. The idea that someone from within the community, a trusted neighbor, perhaps, could be responsible for such horror was almost too terrible to contemplate. Yet this is precisely what the Candy Lady represents: the betrayal of trust, the perversion of safety, and the ultimate invasion of the sanctity of home. The legend also speaks to broader cultural anxieties of the time. As America moved from the rural, agrarian society of the 19th century into the modern age, there was a growing fear of the unknown, of the changes that came with industrialization, urbanization, and the loss of traditional ways of life. The Candy Lady, with her old-fashioned, almost quaint method of luring children with sweets, is a symbol of this tension, a figure who embodies both the nostalgia for a simpler time and the terror of its dark underside. The psychological dimensions of the Candy Lady legend. On a psychological level, the Candy Lady legend is a powerful exploration of the themes of loss, madness, and the corruption of innocence. The story begins with the tragic death of Clara Crane's daughter, Marcella, a loss that drives Clara to the brink of insanity. In many ways, the legend can be seen as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unprocessed grief and unresolved trauma. Clara's descent into madness and her transformation into the Candy Lady is a metaphor for how grief can distort and destroy, turning love into something twisted and deadly. The candy that Clara uses to lure her victims is a potent symbol in this context. Candy is typically associated with childhood, innocence, and joy, but in the hands of the Candy Lady, it becomes an instrument of death. This inversion of a symbol of innocence into one of horror speaks to the deep psychological impact of trauma, the way in which something sweet and pure can be corrupted, turned into a tool of destruction. The Candy Lady's method of operation, leaving candy on windowsills, luring children away from their homes, also taps into deep-seated fears about the safety of home and family. The home is supposed to be a place of safety, a refuge from the dangers of the outside world. But in the Candy Lady legend, the very things that make a home safe, its familiarity, its routine, are used against it. The candy left on the windowsill is an invasion of that safety, a violation of the boundary between inside and outside, home and the unknown. This psychological dimension of the legend is what makes the Candy Lady so terrifying. She is not just a monster who preys on children. She is a symbol of the ways in which the most mundane aspects of life can be twisted into something horrifying. She represents the fear that the things we trust most, our homes, our communities. The evolution of the Candy Lady from local legend to national phenomenon. As with many urban legends, the story of the Candy Lady has evolved over time, growing from a local tale of terror into a national phenomenon. The basic elements of the story, Clara Crane, the poisoned candy, the missing children, have remained the same, but each new retelling has added new layers, new interpretations, and new horrors. In the early days of the legend, the Candy Lady was primarily a cautionary tale, told to children to keep them from wandering too far from home or accepting candy from strangers. But as the story spread beyond its original community, it began to take on new meanings. In some versions of the story, the Candy Lady is a vengeful spirit, driven by her need to avenge her daughter's death. In others, she is a demon or witch, using her candy to cast spells and trap children's souls. The legend has also been influenced by the changing cultural landscape of America. In the 1950s and 60s, for example, the story of the Candy Lady was often told alongside other urban legends about poisoned Halloween candy, reflecting the growing concerns about child safety in an increasingly industrialized and urbanized society. In the 1980s and 90s, the story was often used to explore themes of stranger danger as parents became more concerned about the potential threats posed by outsiders in their communities. In the 21st century, the Candy Lady has become a symbol of the darker side of nostalgia. In an era where retro and vintage culture is celebrated, the Candy Lady represents the horror that can lie beneath the surface of seemingly innocent things. Her story has been adapted into films, books, and television shows, often with a focus on the psychological horror of her methods and the impact of her actions on the community. The Candy Lady in contemporary media, a new icon of horror. In contemporary media, the Candy Lady has become an iconic figure of horror, a character who embodies the fear of the unknown and the corruption of innocence. She has been featured in a variety of films, television shows, and books, each one exploring different aspects of her legend and adding new dimensions to her character. In many modern adaptations, the Candy Lady is portrayed as a tragic figure, a woman driven to madness by the loss of her daughter and the failure of her community to protect her. This portrayal adds a layer of complexity to the character, making her more than just a one-dimensional villain. It also highlights the themes of grief, loss, and trauma that are central to the legend. The Candy Lady has also become a popular subject in the world of true crime and urban legends. Her story is often featured in podcasts, documentaries, and online forums dedicated to exploring the darker side of human nature. These platforms have introduced the legend to a new generation of horror enthusiasts, ensuring that the story of the Candy Lady continues to be told and retold. In many ways, the Candy Lady has become a modern-day boogeyman, a figure who embodies the fears and anxieties of the contemporary world. Her story is a reminder that the things we fear most are often the things that are closest to us, the people we trust, the places we call home, and the emotions we keep hidden away. The Candy Lady is a symbol of the darkness that can lie just beneath the surface of everyday life, waiting to be unleashed. The legacy of the Candy Lady. A tale that will not die. The legend of the Candy Lady is a story that refuses to die. It has been passed down from generation to generation, each retelling adding new layers of meaning and horror. The story has evolved from a local tale of terror into a national phenomenon, a symbol of the fears and anxieties that have haunted communities for generations. At its core, the legend of the Candy Lady is a story about the corruption of innocence, the dangers of unprocessed grief, and the fear of the unknown. It is a story that speaks to the darkest corners of the human psyche, exploring the ways in which love can turn into hate, safety can turn into danger, and trust can turn into betrayal. The Candy Lady will continue to be a part of American folklore, her story told and retold by those who seek to understand the darker aspects of human nature. Whether she was a real person or a figment of collective imagination, the Candy Lady has left an indelible mark on the cultural landscape, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create ourselves. As long as there are dark nights and quiet streets, the story of the Candy Lady will continue to be told, a tale that will haunt the imaginations of those who dare to listen, a story that will never truly die.